Good evening and welcome to a brand new Malkat gin video, and tonight we are doing episode 2 in our gin making series. Last time we made a compound gin, we talked about how it was an easy way to do it, but if you're using commercial vodka all the time, it's not necessarily the cheapest. So the next step would be to make your own neutral spirit, or make your own vodka effectively. So to go to the next step, you're going to need a still. So this is my first still. This is the T500 from Still Spirits, and they sell starter packs. Basically, I got all this in the starter pack. The still, the brewing barrel. Now, anyone who's made homebrew beer would recognize this. It's pretty much similar setup. This will have an airlock on top of it. We've got a filter jug, we've got a measuring jug, we've got a beaker, tall beaker, and then we've got a couple of meters. So this is a specific gravity meter, and we use this during our fermentation process to work out how far through the fermentation it is. And this one is slightly different but looks similar. This is an alcohol meter, so you can drop it into a liquid and it will tell you the percentage of alcohol. So this is what we're going to use. It's a two-step process. Effectively, to make gin, you will make beer. You'll turn beer into vodka, and you'll turn vodka into gin. So we start with the brewing barrel. We create our wash in this. Basically, when you're starting out, it's 4 ingredients. It's sugar, water, yeast, and a bit of heat. That produces a liquid that's sort of like beer. We take it from that, we put it into the still, we still it down, and it takes all the alcohol out of that liquid and produces our vodka. So this is what's known as a reflux still. Very good at making high quality neutral spirit. Part of what it does though is it strips all the flavour out of it. So it's not that much good for making gin, but we'll talk about that later. So what it does, you put your liquid in here. There's a heating plate underneath. We switch it on. As it heats up, the liquid will start to boil. Alcohol boils at a lower temperature than water. So the alcohol turns to vapour, passes up through the column and comes out, and out here we get alcohol. So that's it. So let's get into it. We're going to relocate from here, go to the kitchen, and we'll get stuck into making our wash. Welcome back, and we've now relocated to the Malkat distillery. The kitchen. We talked about we needed 4 things to make our wash. We needed sugar and yeast, which we've got on the board over there. We needed heat, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and we need water. Well, we've got plenty of water in the tap. But that's to make a pretty straightforward wash. And when you buy the kit for a T500, which was the still I showed you downstairs, they will give you a starter pack which includes some what they call turbo sugar and turbo yeast. And for a 23 litre wash, which is what will go in this, they'll give you 6 kilos of sugar and enough yeast for 6 kilos of sugar. It's pretty easy. If you follow the instructions, there's plenty of videos on YouTube, so you just follow along and you'll be right. Once you've done a few, you'll get to the point where you'll think the turbo wash is okay, but the flavour could be better. And start doing a bit of research. You'll come up with some more recipes. So what I'm going to show you today is perhaps one of those next steps. So as well as our sugar and our yeast, that's just normal baker's yeast that we got from the supermarket. We're going to add bran. This is baker's bran. We're going to use a multivitamin, and it's for the wash. It's not for me. We've got some citric acid. Everything so far is all from the supermarket. We have some Epsom salts, again, still from the supermarket. Now, the only thing that I had to get from a specialty shop is this stuff, and it's called diammonium phosphate, commonly known as DAP. And what DAP is a wine yeast nutrient. Because we're using less sugar and we're just using a normal baker's yeast, we need to do a bit more work to make sure that yeast is happy and fed. Common misconception is that the yeast eats the sugar and produces alcohol. That's not quite true, and the way it was described to me is it's It's more like the yeast breathes the sugar and exhales alcohol. So if someone knows more, correct me in the comments. Anyway, so that's what we're going to use today. That looks like a lot, but the thing is, we're only going to use some of this. We will use all the sugar. We will use half the bran. The multivitamin, you're probably thinking, well, this is looking expensive already. That's a container of 90 tablets, and we need 1 per wash. And one of these washes will probably give us 8 litres of alcohol. So pretty cheap. Citric acid, teaspoon, it's all in small quantities. I think all up, probably the sugar is the most expensive thing. We're using 4 kilos of sugar, and that will be about $13, $14 from the supermarket. First thing I've done, probably can't quite see it on the stove, I've got 2 litres of water in a large pot, and that is starting to boil. I have pre-measured out 250 grams of bran. Now, if you're wondering, bran, if you think about commercial vodkas, they use various things for sugar: potatoes, wheat, bran. So it's a more complex sugar, and we need to break it down a little bit before it goes into the wash, so the yeast can get at those sugars. So we're going to stick it in our boiling water. We'll give that a good stir and bring that back to the boil. Now, once that comes back to the boil, we will turn it down to the simmer and let it simmer for 30 minutes. So once that happens, we'll go away and come back. But we can keep going. There's plenty of stuff we can do. Is we're going to get a little bit of warm water in our fermenter. There we go. That's 5 litres of warm water in our fermenter, and we're now going to get our sugar in there and dissolve it. So we're putting in 4 kilos of sugar. We're going to weigh everything. So the big bag is 3 kilos, and you might think that you can trust it to be 3 kilos. I know from having just measured out the wheat bran that the bag, although it says it's got 450 grams, had more like 480 grams in it. So measure everything. It says 1.2 kilos. And another 1.2. We're up to 2.4. Let's see. Well, there you go. Prove me wrong. That was pretty much bang on 3 kilos. Now we need another kilo from this bag. So this is a 1.5, so I do need to measure it. Now it's just me turning down my bran and putting the timer on. There we go. 4 kilos of sugar in. Now we're going to get a big stirrer and make sure that sugar dissolves. Our sugar is now fully dissolved, and I've topped the fermenter up to the 20 litre mark. There's a scale on the barrel there with cold water. I'm now going to add the other things that we need in here. We've got our multivitamin pill. The multivitamin is also nutrients for the yeast. And we're just going to crush it in our mortar and pestle. We'll crush that. It just means it dissolves easier. So straight in. We'll add a dash of Epsom salts. Now we're going to add a pinch of Epsom salts. And then we're going to add half a teaspoon of our wine nutrient. So we've given it a good mix. That's all nicely mixed up. Doesn't look like much. It kind of looks like mucky water, which is pretty much what it is. We now have to wait for our bran, which has another 20 minutes. So our bran has finished simmering, and it's time to add it to the fermenter. We've turned it off, given it a stir, and we're just going to add it straight in. We want to make sure we get all that lovely bran. There we go. So we're going to want to give that a really good stir. Make sure it's mixed well and make sure it's well aerated. I've seen one suggestion where someone used a stick blender for this. Not a bad idea. That looks pretty good. Now, we're almost ready to add our yeast, but we just need to check one more thing. So yeast likes a slightly acidic environment. So we're just going to check the pH of our wash. And we've got a handy dandy new toy for that. This is a pH reader. Let's turn it on. All we do is we dip it in, give it a good swirl, and of course put our glasses on because we can't see without them. Okay, so that's reading 6.6, which is almost neutral. So we're just going to add half a teaspoon of citric acid. Give that a stir. And we'll just check our measurement again. It's about 5.6. It should come down naturally with the yeast. The yeast activity should reduce the pH a little bit further. One last thing before we add our yeast. Our baker's yeast is quite susceptible to temperature, and we want to make sure our wash is less than 30 degrees before we stick it in. So, simple meat thermometer. Kate's just noted that there is a stick-on thermometer on the side, and it's reading 28, which is almost perfect, but we're just going to check it with our thermometer, our probe. This should be more accurate. Okay, so that's reading about 26, so our stick-on's not too far off. Now here's our yeast. I've measured it out. 50 grams of baker's yeast. Now we're not going to dump it straight in. We want to rehydrate it first. So I've got 100 mils of water. Just give that a stir. Doesn't take long. We've just stirred that in, and already I can feel it thickening and the yeast is foaming up. So we need to add that to the wash as well. This won't pour in because it's mixed and it's reacted so quickly. So we'll have to add it in this way. Yep. Okay, so again, we want to give it a good stir, make sure that yeast is well mixed in and nicely aerated. That's our wash done. We've stirred it up, got plenty of air into it, made sure all those clumps of yeast have broken apart. All we've got to do is put the lid on. Now, this will take off pretty quickly in the first 24 hours. So when we put our lid on, we'll just put it on loosely to start with. However, there's a couple of things we need to do. I'll just uncover a couple of holes. So we're just going to sit that lid on there. Now the first one is our airlock, and this is our airlock. So all that does is that's going to sit in there. Our fermentation process is going to produce gas, carbon dioxide, and we want to allow that to release. However, we don't want impurities getting in. So after 24 hours, this lid will be sealed, and so having the airlock allows the gas to escape without any pressure build-up and prevents impurities going in. From memory, we have to put that on first and then put our airlock in. There we go. Now, second hole, this doesn't come standard. This is a temperature probe. We're just going to push it down through our lid, if we can get our hole open again. There we go. So I've got that sitting just above the liquid, and a little bit of blue tack just to seal our hole. Now, one more thing. I have a new toy. This is called and this will sit in our fermenter, and it measures the specific gravity. Specific gravity is a measure of relative density. So water being a specific gravity of 1. So anything more dense will have a gravity higher than 1, and anything less dense will have a specific gravity less than 1. So our mixture, because we've added sugar and a bunch of stuff to it, will be higher than 1, and as the sugars are broken down and turned into alcohol, it will reduce down. We're aiming to get this down to around 0.99 or 0.9, somewhere around there, and then it'll be finished. So we drop this in. The beauty of that connects via our home Wi-Fi and sends a signal to my phone. So I'll be able to monitor progress as we go. It's pretty simple. I could get into how it works, but maybe another video. Look it up on YouTube. There's YouTube's on it. So there's our barrel setup. One last thing I said at the start, the fourth thing we needed was heat. Now we want to control the temperature. We don't want it too hot or too cold. So somewhere in the 25 to 28 degree range. You will notice our keg is sitting on a platform here. This is something I've built, and into the platform I've built a plant heat pad. So that will sit underneath and just generate some warmth coming up. Now I discovered the last time I did this that didn't generate quite enough heat for me, and my wash dropped below 25 degrees for the last part of the fermentation, which is not the end of the world. It means it'll just take longer. But I wanted to have more control, so I have bought a really cheap single electric blanket, which I will wrap around and we'll set that up. Over here, that temperature probe that I just put in, and we'll turn it on and see what it's registering. The temperature probe that I just put in is registering that it is. The bottom one is our target, is our heating target. So this can do heating and cooling. We shouldn't need the cooling. And the top one is the current temperature. So it's saying, okay, your wash isn't warm enough. We need to warm it up. So our heating pad will have turned on, and our electric blanket, once we put it around, will also turn on. And that will sit there quite nicely. If it gets too hot, everything will turn off and let it cool down. And if it drops too low, it'll turn on and heat it up. For those without the fancy toys, we talked about this is a measure for specific gravity. So we can drop that in. It's currently reading 1.06. So there we go. So I'm going to go off and finish setting this up. And once I've done, we'll come back, we'll take a look, and I'll talk about the next step. Here we go. We've got our barrel all nicely wrapped up. There's our electric blanket, and I've got a couple of blankets just on as an insulator. So one important tip when you do this, make sure you've got it set up somewhere that it can sit for perhaps a week and not get in your way. So this is over in the corner of the kitchen, on the kitchen table, and there's my tap on the fermenter for when it's time to empty it and transfer it to the still. So it's convenient. We've got all our plugs set up over here out the way, and everything's plugged into a residual current device. So if there's any shorts or any issues, that's going to trip and switch everything off. The other thing I wanted to say about the thermostat controller is it also connects to the Wi-Fi, so I can check what's happening with the temperature two ways, via the thermostat controller and via our pill that's sitting in the wash. So this is our thermostat controller. This is the little probe stuck through the lid, and as you can see, it's trending up nicely as our heating has come on. And then this one's a little bit more complicated. So all the historic data there from about there to the left is when it was just sitting on the table. So that blue line is the temperature, and you can see it's come up nicely, and our red line is our specific gravity, and you can see it's sitting around that 1.06 mark, and that will just take a measurement every 30 minutes. The other thing you'll notice if it's doing its thing properly is you should be able to get a good smell. You can always just crack the lid partway through just to check that everything's going okay. If that yeast is doing its stuff properly, then probably quite a banana-y smell, and you'll get bubbles. Yeah. So depending on how active it is, you'll see bubbling in your airlock. So that's going to go mental probably for 24 hours, as I said, and then the whole thing's going to take about 6 to 7 days at the most, depending on temperature. We'll go away for a few days, and next time we see you, it'll be time to put it in the still. See you in a week.